Welcome to the CFL three-down breakdown for week number 5 in the Canadian Football League. I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, joined by Andrew McGinnis as we are ready to break down week 5 action in the Canadian Football League. It has been an interesting start to the season, without a doubt. We've had a lot of consistency issues, I guess you could say, with a lot of the teams so far. We've seen teams not really be able to put back-to-back quality games together. Ottawa's a good example. Hamilton's a good example. Edmonton's a good example. You can go on further. Winnipeg, they played bad last week. They bounced back this week. So again, lack of consistency and really parity. More so than lack of consistency is what's the story in the CFL. Anyone can win any given week, and we're clearly seeing that here in the first 4 weeks of the season. Andrew, we got week 5 on tap. We've got 3 games. Weird schedule this week. Only 3 games in the Canadian Football League. 3 teams are on byes. Hamilton, Saskatchewan, and Montreal are your 3 teams not playing this week. So as a result, it's a very light slate. 1 game Thursday, 1 game Friday, and 1 game Saturday. So and they're all rematch games, by the way. Season rematch games from previous meetings earlier this season. So a very interesting rematch situation to really analyze and handicap with all 3 of these games. So let's start it off. Calgary and Ottawa on Thursday night. Very interesting battle there. East versus West matchup. Calgary laying a field goal. Three and a half showing up actually in a couple of spots. So Calgary money starting to show up just a little bit. The total 54 and a half in this game. If you remember, they played a couple of weeks ago in Calgary. Ottawa's offense could not gain any sort of traction. It was probably not probably. It was Trevor Harris's worst game. It was Ottawa's offensively. It was their worst game of the season. Couldn't really get things going against that Calgary defense. They end up falling 24-14. Game stays well under the total. And we had mentioned before that game, it had been a very high-scoring recent series history between the Red Blacks and Stampeders. One over after another. That did not carry over into the first meeting this season in Calgary just a couple of weeks ago. Ottawa got their offense back on track last week. Was it a product of them just, being better focused, better execution, or was it just the Montreal defense that made them better? That's the question you got to ask yourself, perhaps, going into this game. They obviously got out to a huge lead in the first half, really coasted in the second half to a comfortable victory against the Montreal Alouettes, who really proved that they couldn't really sustain prosperity. Could not follow up that first win to snap that 13-game losing skid. That after that first win, they had to snap that skid against Saskatchewan. So it's a very interesting football game here. I mean, Ottawa is looking to win 2 games in a row. Calgary off a bye week. Calgary 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread. 3-0 to the under as well. I mean, Calgary's been an under machine so far early in the new season. So it's an interesting game. When I look at a rematch situation, I don't want to say I automatically look to bet on the team that lost the first game or bet the reverse from a totals perspective, but I try to make a case to do that anyway. So right now, without really, it's a game that I'm still mulling over because there's a lot of factors going into it. Calgary's been very good off a bye in recent years. I know their track record in bye week situations is good, but the counter argument is Calgary's track record in the East has not been good. Okay, other than beating Hamilton, unfortunately, as a Ticat fan, they've not played well at times in Toronto up until the game earlier this season. They've been awful in Montreal, and they have been nip and tuck and right down to the wire just to beat Ottawa on the road in years past. They've really had a tougher time of it, the Stampeders, in recent seasons in these East Coast, Eastern time zone games. So that's a counter argument there. I'm leaning a little to the Ottawa, especially if I can get over 3. Toward Ottawa. The total, I'm also leaning to this game going over. I could see it definitely being a different sort of game than what we saw the last time. Again, when you see these rematch situations, you got Calgary and Ottawa playing just 2 weeks ago. What are both teams taking out of that game? We couldn't really get anything going offensively. Because let's be honest, Calgary really didn't do anything on offense until the fourth quarter of that game. And then they started to move the ball. But Calgary's offense was every bit as dormant for about 3 quarters in that game as Ottawa's was. And Ottawa really just never got going at all in that game. But even Calgary, it took their offense until the fourth quarter to wake up. Let's also keep in mind the total in that game was 57. Now it's down 54. So we've seen a lowering by 3 points of this total compared to the first meeting between these two teams. So I like to, take advantage of that little pendulum swing downward in the total. Maybe look for this game to feature a few more big plays and a few more big explosive plays offensively on both sides of the football, especially because I think both teams are looking at that first meeting and saying, what can we do better offensively? Because Calgary is going to say, we could have played better offensively against Ottawa in that first game, and Ottawa's going to say, we could have played better offensively against Calgary, much better offensively against Calgary than we did in that first game. So I think you'll see bigger, stronger, more impactful, more focused in on adjustments offensively for both of these teams. So definitely looking at a situation where the over is definitely a total I'm looking at here in this game. Probably like it slightly more than the Ottawa side, but we'll lock things in probably a little bit closer to kickoff. The good news for Ottawa, too, is Kyrese Bear was suspended for a game last week, but he for a hit in that Calgary game, but he'll be back from that one-game suspension. For this game, obviously, is going to bolster their defense, which actually Ottawa's defense has played remarkably solidly so far this season. Let's get to Andrew's take on the Stamps and Red Blacks. The Week 5 kickoff game will be inundated with some country song. Thank God the Thursday night game is going to be in Hamilton next week, where we're going to have a rock band actually performing at halftime. Not in this country anymore. It's time to shake it up finally. We're going to have some good old-fashioned rock and roll for our Thursday night concert next Thursday night in Hamilton. Looking forward to that when they host Saskatchewan. Andrew, Calgary, Ottawa, what do you see here?
Yeah, I can't really agree with that. I'm a pretty big East Coaster. I enjoy my country music when I can. I like rock too, but I got to love a little bit of country every now and then. But yeah, you know what, Ian, it is a really weird week. I mean, you see everyone in the comment section wondering, what's going on with the games. You and I were chatting a little bit before the show started about, the very short selection of games here to look at. But the good news is, we do have that Ottawa-Calgary rematch game. And that's kind of one thing in the CFL you do see a lot. And especially as the season progresses, you start kind of looking back at what we noticed, what we learned from the previous meeting, the previous matchup. And one thing I will add on to what you said, Ian, I was on the under in the last meeting, Ottawa Calgary. But right now, looking at what these two teams are saying in their conferences, in player interviews, what the coaches are looking at, I feel like it'll be a lot higher scoring. I mean, we're getting 54.5 in both the Ottawa game versus Calgary, of course, and Toronto and Edmonton. I feel like, as far as those two games we're getting the odds for right now, I feel like this game, Ottawa has a lot more of an opportunity to go over that total. I think Ottawa, you're talking about inconsistency, Ian. I mean, if you're a trends better, if you're a look at what we saw last week and bet again next week, I mean, you're not getting the best result. I mean, these two teams have not really identified themselves too much so far. But, one thing Calgary has really shown us is that they can still put up points. And I do think that Ottawa will come to play as well. And they'll go for a little bit more of dangerous plays, like you mentioned, Ian. Try and get a little more, deep passes, not play as conservatively. I felt like that game, that last one was a little more of a defensive minded game, just kind of going through the motions, getting first down after first down. But I feel like in a rematch kind of mindset here, we're closing in on, we're in the 5th week of the season now. This means a little more something. So I will think that these two teams will come out. Trevor Harris, boy, oh boy, he's looking good. I mean, he's picking his targets. He's finding players. I think Sinopoli is kind of the sleeper on that team, really. I mean, everyone always talks about Ellingson, Ian, but I almost feel like Sinopoli's that sleeper that he may not get as many targets, but he makes that great 40-yard catch, 30-yard catch, great play when it's time to do that. So honestly, I think that this game right now, the best play, Calgary looks strong, but the best play will be to look over the total at 54.5.
Yeah, Calgary's been incredible off of bye. Rick Smith in the chat, no question. And that's the thing. That's why if I like Ottawa, I will absolutely need the hook. 3 in the hook here in this game. I would need 3.5 to actually pull the trigger on Ottawa. Plus 3 is not enough, even though I would lean Ottawa slightly. But you're right, Calgary, and it is a short enough price tag where we're talking about just straight up off a buy. Calgary has been absolutely spectacular. They're in a short enough price range where a win could indeed equal a cover here. So that is definitely the concern that I would have taking Ottawa, even though I kind of think they've got a better performance in them against Calgary this time around. And Calgary's had a tough time in Ottawa. Let's be honest. I mean, these have been close games. What were they, a tie last year in Ottawa? And I think 2 years in a row they've tied in Ottawa, believe it or not, the Stamps and the Red Blacks. So it's been a very tough environment for the Stamps to go in and win in. So we'll see if that little recent track record continues Thursday night. Friday, we've got Toronto, Edmonton. Edmonton laying 7 here in this game. The total 53.5, 54, depending on where you look. It really is padded toward Edmonton, and it's because you got a revenge situation here. Edmonton losing a tough one in Toronto last week. I like Toronto in that game. Unfortunately, I also like the over in that game. And man, if you had the over in that game, you're really frustrated. I mean, it was a total expedition by the Edmonton Eskimos. We can move the ball like a hot knife through butter inside the 30s, inside the 20s, and then we can do everything in our might to just find a way to stub our toe and screw it up when we get close to the end zone. It was like that time and time again. What did I think back to? I saw a missed field goal in one possession. I saw penalties that knocked them out of field goal range one possession. I saw a bad Mike Riley decision to throw an interception, ill-timed late in the first half when they were really marching into Toronto territory. And then, of course, in the second half, it really wasn't all that much better. Defenses started to dig in. But the bottom line is there could have been 30-some, even closing in on 40 points, to be honest with you, in the first half. There were that many opportunities. And then you just got that sense that with all of those second quarter, especially those missed opportunities to put up points, especially from the Edmonton side, was going to come back to not only haunt them, but haunt anybody that took the over in that game. And that's sure enough what ended up happening, even though the yardage was insane. I think Edmonton piled up nearly 400 total yards of offense, and yet what did they have to show for it? 17 points. That's what the bad break is if you had the over. I mean, you get close to 400 total yards, you're supposed to score and put up more than 17 points on the scoreboard, but that was not the case for Edmonton. Their own mistakes. Way too many penalties again for Edmonton. Well, it's becoming a very bad and very troubling and very frustrating refrain. If you're Jason Moss, if you're Mike Benavides, and you're anyone on this Edmonton coaching staff, because especially on defense, you take way too many penalties. You're not very disciplined right now. You got to rein that in in a hurry. We'll see if they can do that and just do a better job, not giving away free plays and free yards to the other team with bad penalties. And Toronto, I said James Franklin would be solid. He wasn't spectacular, but he was efficient, didn't make too many mistakes. When the time was there to win the football game with that late drive with the Argos trailing, he made it happen. Of course, James Wilder Jr. was a huge help to the Argos and helping James Franklin settle into that game. Great game for James Wilder Jr. He was phenomenal running the football for the Argos, well over 100 yards on the ground. That's the kind of production that I think Mark Trestman is looking for from his ground game to help, just easily and gradually transition Franklin into the starter's role. But Franklin made a decent account for himself here in his very first game. Good completion rate. Like to see the yardage maybe up a little bit more, but good completion rate. Got the touchdown drive when he needed it with his team down late in that football game to get that 20-17 win. So good job for Franklin. Now he goes on the road now for the first time as a starter with the Argos. Let's see how he handles it here. What we know about Edmonton is, they have responded off a loss positively. We remember the loss in Hamilton. They came back the next week against the BC Lions and smacked them around 41-22. And they got off to a slow start in that game and still came back and won by 19 points against the Lions. Now, not going to be as easy here against Toronto. I was looking to play Edmonton. I'll be honest, though. 7, it's tricky. It really, really is at this kind of big-time number. But one thing I know about Edmonton is we've seen that track record of Mike Riley already this season. Off a subpar game, frustrating game, left a ton of points on the board, outgained Toronto a ton in that football game. I think you get Edmonton maybe finishing off some more of those drives with touchdowns this time around. I was hoping this total would come down a little bit, though. I mean, man, when you have a total of 53 and a half the previous meeting, which was, of course, just last week, you have a 20-17 final score, and you see absolutely no adjustment in the total. In fact, it's actually a half point higher. In some cases. Not sure the value's there. I was looking one more time to go, against the flow of what happened in that last game and look for a higher scoring game this time around, but there's been no adjustment. I was hoping for something more around 51, 52 in this football game, and you're getting 53 and a half, 54, much like we saw last week. So I'm not sure the value's there with the over. I'm leaning toward Edmonton, but 7 is a number I've got to really think long and hard about, because we're still talking about an Edmonton team that defensively has made mistakes, has given up big plays, has taken too many penalties at times. But I do think the spot's a really good one for Edmonton. They're at home looking to avenge a loss that they feel they let one get away last week. So I probably would have to play the favorite if I'm playing this game, and I'd probably lean to the over. But in both cases, I'm really, really not sure I've got the value I need to pull the trigger. So this actually could be a pass for me when it's all said and done. But if I want to give you something in terms of an opinion, though, with this game, even if I don't feel strongly about it, got to lean with Edmonton, lean with the over. Just not sure I'll get there at the current numbers. Andrew, Edmonton and Toronto for you on Friday night. What do you think about this game and what you saw last week with these two?
Yeah, Edmonton's beginning to be one of those teams that's like I've been really pretty much saying the past few weeks, Ian, where you have a feeling the whole time they're going to win, but they're almost one of those teams, or those teams where you kind of want to just toss them on a parlay money line. You know they're going to friggin' win the game most of the time, but they're not going to cover. And in this case, they didn't even win the game as well. But this Toronto Argonauts team came out and took care of business. I mean, like you mentioned, you hit it right on the nail. I mean, James Franklin, he came out there. He did what he had to do. Right, nothing too extraordinary, but he did what he had to do. And James Wilder Jr. stepped it up. That's what you need when you have a quarterback stepping in after a bye week. You have to have your first running back step in there. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. He got a touchdown, 120 yards total. I mean, that's what you really need. You need a selection of wide receivers to kind of step it up, and that's honestly what I've always noticed about this Toronto Argonauts team is they do have a large selection of wide receivers and options for their quarterback. So this team does keep you guessing, but like you mentioned, the inconsistency we've seen so far, heading back to Edmonton now, we'll see what this Toronto team can do. Let's face it. I mean, like you mentioned, it's a good spot for Edmonton, more so because it was a letdown game for them. And not like it was a letdown game like Toronto didn't play a decent game, but I just don't think Toronto's defense is nearly as strong as what we saw because, they kind of walked all over Toronto, but just couldn't finish. I mean, they get some first downs, move the chains, and all of a sudden it just wouldn't come together for them. So the way I'm going to look at this game, Ian, I'm going to wait and see what the action looks like, see how the odds change, see how the lines change, because I've noticed over the past 2 weeks here, Ian, and you always talk about lines moving after people sending out their plays or closer to the end of the week. I mean, we've seen a lot of like game day switches where it's like a line goes from starting at -7 to 8.5 even at certain points. And to be quite honest with you, I don't trust Edmonton to blow any team out right now. And that's the biggest problem I have with them. I know Mike Riley and company and CJ Gable, they're so talented, but with the penalties that they take, with their defense still giving up the points that they do, and their trouble in finishing and in getting out of their own end even sometimes, I can't trust them to lay a lot of points. That's just the way it is with Edmonton right now. I cannot trust them to start out because you know what? I would possibly even look at a Toronto first half. And I'm saying that with them being on the road. But that's just, I really think Edmonton's one of those teams that just kind of, goes through the motions in the first half. We're speaking of going through the motions in the first half. We got the World Cup going on right now. We might as well eliminate the first half since there's so many 0-0 draws. That's pretty much the same thing as the Edmonton Eskimos. They just go through the motions in the second half. They're probably down 3 or 4. Then Mike Riley comes out and does his thing and steps up. They end up winning the game by 4 or 5. So you know what? If the public does hammer Edmonton, I will jump on Toronto if I can get an 8.5 number. And I just can't see Edmonton blowing any team out right now.
All right, you're looking at the that's the same issues I've got with Edmonton. I like the spot. I think they're back at home. I know they'll play better. Are they going to win by more than a touchdown? That's what it's going to take here. You're not even getting below 7. You're getting 7, and you're even 7.5 at 5 dimes right now. If you go to sbrodds.com, that's obviously the place you want to go to make sure you get the best lines and prices at all times. That's where you even see that 7.5 with Edmonton. So I'm not convinced it's the greatest bargain in the world right now to look toward this Eskimo side, even though I like the situation for them. And I'm not fully convinced, James Franklin can do what he did last week on the road for a second week. But let's not underestimate what an 0-2 team, a desperate 0-2 team off a bye week, maybe what that bye week does, recharges the batteries. Now you get that first win. You're feeling good again, and maybe bring some confidence with you here into this game on the road against the Eskimos. Now with the Argos at 1-2, and with the East Division as up and down as it is. I mean, what's Ottawa? They're only 2-2 so far. Hamilton's 2-2. Montreal's obviously down in the sewer in the division, but that's a wide open division right now. It's anybody's division to be had at this point in time. So if Toronto at 1-2 feels like they're right in the mix currently in the East Division and maybe able to make a little run here after getting that first win last week. So very interesting game. But again, I'm leaning Edmonton and over still, but I still feel in the pit of my stomach I'm going to have to look toward maybe either doing a teaser, Edmonton to the over teaser in this game, or just hope maybe this line crashes down a little bit, because I don't know if I want to lay a full 7 with this squad right now, even though in theory this is a positive expectation spot for them. Winnipeg, BC, Saturday night. This is the wrap-up game for Week 5. No line here, no total here, and I understand why that is. BC's got quarterback concerns and question marks going into this football game. Wally Quano is non-committal yet. Who the starter is going to be, last report, And if anybody saw Jonathan Jennings' performance last week, you can understand why it's being debated and decided right now internally by the BC coaching staff. I mean, it was a dreadful game for Jonathan Jennings. It's and a guy that I have given pass after pass to get his act in gear, to show me what he's got in him, and he's just continuing, literally and figuratively, fumbling the football every time he gets this opportunity to prove me that he can be a number one quarterback. It's disappointing. It's frustrating because I see a skill set and the tools in the toolbox for Jonathan Jennings to be an awesome CFL quarterback. Mobility, athleticism, a pretty good arm, but the things that continue to get him in trouble are just bad decisions and forcing footballs that have no business being thrown into the types of coverages that he's throwing them into. We saw it again last week, and his old teammate Adam Bighill victimizes him not once but twice because he reads the quarterback's eyes. One of them returned for a touchdown, which really put that game out of reach. So now Wally Buono is seriously thinking about making a quarterback change. And here's the issue with that. You've got Cody Fajardo, that in the very, very limited starting duty he got with the Toronto Argonauts prior to this season, did not do anything to impress me. Had the same issues, decent mobility, but accuracy issues, decision-making issues. And your other option is Travis Lulay, who's maybe one hit away from having his career over. That's your options right now for the BC Lions. Like, let's be honest, that is what you're looking at here. I mean, there is no option behind John Jennings right now that, as you say, man, I think this guy can turn it around. Oh, I think Travis Lulay can go in there and spark the thing when maybe one more sack means he's out for another season. I mean, it's a really, really troubling time right now for the BC Lions from evaluating their quarterback position, because it's really at a point now where do you turn to? What option do you go to where you have utmost confidence right now that a quarterback can help you and your offense get on track? I mean, Fajardo's a big question mark, big stinking question mark, if you saw anything that he did out of Toronto. Lulay is peanut brittle, waiting to explode at this point. And then you've got John Jennings, who is just one interception after another from him, one bad decision, one forced ball into double coverage after another. So your issues right now for BC are everywhere. And the CFL especially, but even the NFL, even in college football, it's hard to win games. It's hard to be a good football team when your quarterback position is that big of a question mark right now. And that's the way it is right now for the BC Lions. And then they're playing a team that they played last week in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that has absolutely no question marks at the quarterback position, that now has all the answers they need at the quarterback position with the return of Matt Nichols last week from injury. He was terrific in his first start. His passing numbers weren't gaudy, but again, he was efficient, made the throws when he needed to, relied on Andrew Harris, who had a tremendous game against his old team, running the football for Winnipeg. And I'm starting to really like this receiving core. I mean, depth on this receiving core. Darvin Adams, Darius Bowman, Weston Dressler. How about this Drew Wolotarski kid, too, stepping up? He's played very well for this Winnipeg team, catching the football, former Minnesota Golden Gopher. In fact, he's got a connection with Chris Strevler. They played together for a little bit of time in college. So this is a Winnipeg team that obviously, after a bad loss in Hamilton, with Strevler was not quite on his game that night. They get Nichols back. Everybody's pumped up. And boy, they put one on BC last week, 41-19. Really non-competitive from the beginning. All right, BC hung around for a quarter, but after that, it was all Winnipeg. Look, I know BC is back home. It's revenge for them playing Winnipeg. I can't back BC now. I told you I couldn't back BC last week, and I'm telling you right now I can't back BC this week either. Revenge be damned, revenge or not. Their quarterback situation is one big fat question mark that I'm not ready to bet on seeing an answer to right now. So we'll see where this line comes out, but I'm telling you right now, I could only look to Winnipeg. We know BC's got no home field edge in this league anymore. BC Place Stadium has become one of the absolute worst home field advantages in the CFL. It's a disadvantage. There's nobody there. It's becoming just as bad as, say, Montreal in the East. It's really sad to see. I mean, they packed BC Place Stadium in their heyday 5, 10, 20 years ago. And now you're barely able to fill the bottom bowl of that stadium, and it's really really disappointing to see. But the team's got to give those fans a reason to come out to the stadium, and right now they're not. Their only win is and we go back to that. The only win is the lethargic 22-10, didn't do anything to impress me kind of win against the lowly Montreal Alouettes. That's it. And even in the point spread cover, I mean, they only covered that game late in the fourth quarter. So for me, it's Winnipeg or pass right now. I think BC's just in a state of disarray, and I just don't know what I'm going to get at the quarterback position, making that a tough team to back when they're going through that kind of problem. Andrew, Winnipeg, BC, Saturday night to wrap up the week. What do you see here in this game?
Yeah, Ian, you kind of stole the little phrase I was going to say. Man, oh man, this BC team is the Montreal Alouettes of the West, I'd say. And you know what the one difference is between them and the Alouettes, Ian? They've stuck with the same QB, but he hasn't done anything for them, anything to progress them, anything to move them forward. You mentioned it last season. I talked about it at the beginning of this season. This really was his season, Jonathan Jennings, at the beginning of this season to make a mark. We're going to week 5 now. This was his season to kind of, I know he's got a lot tougher of a West division than the East, but this was his season to kind of progress. And you know what? I just don't think he's cut out for this CFL league. I honestly don't think that he's that number one guy in BC, and he will not be in the near future if he cannot step his game up. I mean, you and I have said maybe this is his time here, this is his spot here, but sometimes I feel like the arm strength isn't there. Sometimes it's the accuracy, the power, even in the short throws. We used to think he was mobile, but now he's fumbling the ball around a little bit, getting tackled a lot easier than he used to be. He's not too old. We don't really know what it is, but he's got some talented wide receivers. He's got a coach on the way out, but wants to win, wants to do well in his last season, and it's just not looking well for them. You know what? That game last week, Ian, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, their game. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, that game last week, I really, really, really was disappointed in myself that I even waited so long to get on it. I went a lot lighter on it than I probably should have. I mean, holy crap. I mean, it was -6. The fact that Matt Nichols was back, I mean, the wide receiving crew looked untouchable. Andrew Harris had himself a freaking game. That could have been the really big Kickstarter for this Winnipeg team. We got to get our hats off to Chris Streveler. Ian, I think you agree with me that he did his job. He stepped in, fulfilled that role for Matt Nichols. But boy, oh boy, Matt Nichols came in with a bang and made his name known. So he's back. Andrew Harris looked exceptional. Everyone, Adams, Bowman, Dressler, they all looked exceptional for this Winnipeg team. And you know what? Heading into this week, it doesn't really seem like much is going to change at all. So, I think that BC could lose by 2 touchdowns, so I depending on what the line that we see, that could really be once again, quite a bit of a blowout. One thing I will look at though, is Winnipeg to work on their defense, because that's the only real problem that I see with them. So, if we see too high of a posted total, I might look at the under as a pretty good value bet there.
Yeah. I mean, one of these Winnipeg BC games has to stay under at some point. I mean, it's been one over after another. And yeah, you needed a last minute fourth quarter touchdown last week to push that game over the total, but it still got there. What's the total going to be for this game? Because again, we're looking at Winnipeg BC. It's been what now? I believe 7-1 to the over, if I'm not mistaken, the last 8 meetings between Winnipeg and BC. And these overs between the two teams, like we're talking 60s for most of these games. The total points are at the very high 50s. And of course, we got exactly 60 points last Saturday when these two teams met. So it's interesting. I think if we get, a higher total, there probably will be some undervalue, I would think, in this game, even though it's been an over series. But probably totals wise, I'll stay away. I'm looking more into the Winnipeg side. That's probably something I'm interested in. We'll see where we get this number at. Again, I hate to throw BC under the bus because this is a team I thought could be a sleeper, but they're sleeping all right. They're asleep. They're no sleeper right now. And the quarterback struggles continuing for Jonathan Jennings. That's the main reason why. All right, let's wrap this show up. A little shorter show by a few minutes just because we've only got 3 games. But time to get to best bets. I'll tell you what, it's a massive struggle for me to come up with a best bet. There's 3 games. There's only 2 of them with lines right now because we're waiting on the BC quarterback to be unveiled for Saturday. But I'm going to go Ottawa, Calgary over the total 54. I think we're going to see more offensive flow to this game than we got the last time, which was 24-14. And I like the under in that first Calgary-Ottawa game. So did Andrew as well. So, but I think we're going to see a different game flow this time around. I think Calgary will move the ball. I think Ottawa will move the ball here in this game. It's been high scoring in Ottawa recent years. Red Blacks got their offense going a bit. Calgary, too, I think defensively going to be tougher, I think, because Ottawa's also hinted that they want to play faster. They said they played too slow against Calgary that first time around. So maybe look for some no huddle, look for some up tempo here from Ottawa. That's certainly always good news and music to the ears of anybody betting overs in football when they hear the words up tempo and no huddle. So that could help the cause here if Ottawa decides to run offense at a little faster pace. I think we'll get better offensive showing from these two teams than they showed each other in the first game in Calgary. Let's go over 54 Calgary, Ottawa for my Week 5 CFL 3-down breakdown best bet. By the way, we're 5-3 with best bets. We've exchanged 1-1 weeks now each of the last 3 weeks. 2 weeks ago, my best bet lost, Andrew's won. Last week, Andrew's best bet lost, mine won with Ottawa. So, it's just one of those weeks. We pick each other up. That's the way the show works here. But 5-3 with best bets so far. See if we can keep that going this week. Andrew, let's hear what your best bet is from this Week 5 card.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a teaser. Is that okay, Ian?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If it's a bet, if you can make the bet, you can use it.
All right. Yeah, best bet for me is going to be I'm going to go for a 6-point teaser here. In the Toronto Edmonton, we're going to go for over 48 and Toronto plus the 13. I think there should be some more points in this game. I had a rough loss with the over as my best bet last week on the CFL 3-down breakdown. And again, I just don't think Edmonton can blow teams out. I think Toronto is slowly looking better as the weeks go past. And getting them at a plus 13 mark and the total at 48 for 6-point teaser, I'll take that as my best bet.
All right, there you go. Teaser from Eskimos Argos, a best bet for Andrew for week number 5. That's going to wrap up the show. Again, a little bit of a lighter card this week, just 3 games with 3 teams on a bye week. I believe we get back to 4 games next week for week 6.
Yes.
So make sure you join us then next Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific for our next edition of the CFL 3-down breakdown. For Andrew McGinnis, I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review. Good luck in week 5 CFL action, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.